Goldeneye is a masterpiece. Yes, we were captivated by this video game masterpiece. The game that could have overshadowed Doom had it been multi-platform. The game that an entire generation surely played in barbershops where consoles were set up to keep kids entertained. Loved by many and adored by all, today we'll talk about one of the greatest gems in the gaming world, Goldeneye. Have you ever heard of something timeless? Something that, despite the passage of years, can still be considered a masterpiece and thoroughly enjoyable. Like Monster by Naoki Urasawa with its classic style in the series, Back to the Future, or even the first Alien movie, which looks so current despite being from the 80s. Well, a similar effect happens with Goldeneye, whose only fault was being released during an era filled with today's classics and being exclusive to the Nintendo 64. But don't get it twisted, this game was acclaimed by both critics and the public from the moment it came out, selling 2 million copies. And it's not just us saying this, but a very reliable source from Wikipedia. But what accounts for such success? Rather, how did this miracle occur despite the horrible Nintendo 64 controller? Let me tell you something. Did you know that GoldenEye 007 was released a year before Ocarina of Time? Yeah, that's right. And it even had maps with textures so realistic they make you question why Doom looks so bad. We're talking about what should have been a revolution. Don't think I'm trying to downplay Doom. It's a masterpiece and so well made it runs on anything. But what makes it so special? What's the secret to its success? For those over 35, did you ever play the ET game? A marvel that revolutionized arcade history and proved that movie-based games were a resounding and overwhelming success that attracted crowds. Right? Neither did I. Making a game based on a movie was practically sacrilegious. Even after the year 2000, they kept making those abominations, which, while bringing a few gems, none like Goldeneye. It's a game that wasn't just revolutionary, but marked a turning point in the world of what we now know as shooters and within video games themselves. Although the 007 project seemed like it would fail, especially considering the string of bad game adaptations of movies, it came out differently. We had that crushing expectation, but on the other hand, there was an equally crushed market. A few years ago, around 94, 3D was just being implemented, but it wasn't anything impressive. The best we had was Mario 64, and its textures were anything to write home about. It was a great game because of its gameplay and impressive proposal. As a new technology, many games struggle with balance and movement. Creating a good 3D game was very challenging. When production of the new 007 film began, featuring a new James Bond, the company wanted to reach a young audience and decided to invest in a 3D video game. It smelled like disaster, right? That's what it seemed. But what nobody expected was that the team behind the game truly knew what they were aiming for, to convey the real experience of being 007. The first decision was that if it were to be a shooter, it would be in first person, like Doom, which came out the same year. They aimed to make it immersive and introduced a fantastic new feature, multiplayer. Martin Hollis, the game's director, was an ambitious man who wanted to create not just an adaptation, but something entertaining. All these elements combined to achieve 3 seemingly impossible things for the time. A good adaptation for a movie into a video game, a very realistic game with great gameplay, and an entertaining and addictive game. But saying good game doesn't quite capture it. Goldeneye didn't just impact us, it also made waves in the world of video games. It made history 4 times over. But what made this video game so beloved? Aside from being a miracle both for the industry and the public. For those who know Call of Duty Modern Warfare, you'll recognize it as a turning point in the shooting genre. Promoting medium-scale conflicts with the infiltration missions where certain items had to be collected to avoid a potential global conflict. Before this, Splinter Cell had done something similar, focusing entirely on espionage. Games from 2005, like Chaos Theory, can be considered true masterpieces in terms of gameplay, story, and textures. Years later, Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare came along. What do these games have in common? Their approach to missions, and yes, they all trace their origins back to the mighty 007 Goldeneye, the video game created by Martin Hollis. One of the greatest things Goldeneye brought in '97 was its clear desire to create an experience. Although its story was somewhat of an excuse to justify massacres, the work was well directed and took 3D to the highest point of its time, and what the N64 could handle. People were drawn in by its visuals, and no other title released that year matched its graphical level. But what's incredible is not just its realism, but also how it influenced the genre. Analyzing it over 20 years later, it hasn't changed much. Actually, 25 years. Just 3 years away from turning 30. What makes it magical is that, unlike its competitors, its level design was laid out so you wouldn't get lost. Each map was clearly designed, but not only that, each one was different. They truly went the extra mile to make you experience the movie, with its closed spaces, open areas, and even vehicle driving. This game had it all. Naturally, this was incredibly addictive for the youth of that time, who miraculously bought the Nintendo 64 with that awful controller. Yes, the joke isn't funny anymore. Wait, it isn't a joke, it's an absolute reality. But most importantly, it wasn't just good design. It had good resolution and an interesting story centered on the journey of 007, or rather you embodying 007. Yes, it's certainly forced for the villain to explain his pointless revenge against the whole country for the harm caused by one man, especially knowing that 007 is the only one who can defeat him. But the twist being the villain is actually 006 makes it interesting. It's a game that touched hearts and moved players, at least at its time. But if there's one thing to criticize, it's the gameplay, which was quite uncomfortable. Although it featured auto-aim, it often had issues, slightly breaking immersion. Otherwise, it was a great game that introduced the enter a site, complete certain objectives, and escape as soon as possible mechanic. This formula can involve taking photos, killing someone, rescuing someone, or destroying something set in secret bases, mountains, open and closed spaces, all within a storyline. But we haven't talked about the best part yet. It's multiplayer mode. Yes, that beautiful multiplayer feature that introduced what would later be called shooters. The ability to play with your friends. Tell me, who didn't spend hours shooting with friends in split screen mode to see who would win? It was a fascinating experience. It even included what we now call DLC, or rather additional content from the start, available after finishing the game. Yes, without having to pay. Something that now seems unthinkable for some companies whose names we won't mention. Right, Electronic Arts? With all this, it truly was fantastic. And it also had something that helped it stand the test of time. Given everything we've mentioned, it's clear that this recipe has ensured success for an entire generation, and remains a standard that few games have surpassed in the genre. But how has it managed to stay cherished by people even today? Here comes a twist almost as good as the betrayal of 006. Its own gameplay. Goldeneye didn't quite meet one of those categories due to, repeat after me, the horrible Nintendo 64 controller. That's why the notion of it being a game worth revisiting over the years is largely thanks to its release on multiple consoles and platforms. Especially one very notable platform, Game Pass, the Netflix of cloud gaming and monthly game subscriptions. With its arrival and accessibility, everyone can now experience what the game truly was, achieving something that even its peers of that year, like Doom, also had. When you play with the controller and start shooting, you encounter a fast-paced and addictive game that, combined with everything else, makes it the ultimate timeless shooter. Let's be honest, well-placed, well-textured, and with a story as good as its movie, it's a game that was groundbreaking for its time and remains a completely addictive gem. Why wouldn't someone like it? Things like this make Agent 007 Goldeneye a gem in video game development. It's undoubtedly one of the best crafted games of its era. All of this has made a game that stays in our hearts, just like the hacker stays in 007's heart. And that's it for today. Don't forget to subscribe and give it a thumbs up.